Hello crafty friends, this is card 34 in Full Deck Challenge 2. The prompts are vintage and white. I'm going to be using tissue paper from an old dress pattern to get a vintage look. I like using that for that effect. And then for the white, I will possibly be using texture paste. I'm not quite sure yet what I'll be doing, but let's see where this prompt takes us. So to start, I'll be covering the face of the card with the tissue paper. I'm applying this using Podge. Oops, I've squeezed a little bit too much. You could also use gel medium or craft glue. Once I've applied the tissue paper on top, I'm going to apply another layer of Mod Podge over the tissue paper. This is to protect it and make it a little bit waterproof, so if I add any wet medium on top, it won't tear the tissue paper, which is quite fragile. I dry it really well and then I cut off the excess. Sometimes I tear off the excess tissue paper. For this one, I'm just using a scissors to make a neat edge. To add a little bit to the vintage feel, I'm going to distress the edges using my Distress ink in Vintage Photo and a blender. I've chosen a stencil that I'm going to use for this project. Besides using it with the white medium, I'm also going to do some stenciling with the Distress ink and a blending tool or a blending brush. Just one small section. This I feel will add some dimension. It's not very bold, but it'll sit in the background and give the card some depth. I was originally going to use texture paste, but I have this Tim Holtz grit paste, which is a little bit more grainy, which I really like, so I'm going to use that instead. I'm going to apply it over the stencil with a palette knife just in the bottom half section of my card. This stencil is not the best quality, so some of the grit paste has seeped underneath the design near the bottom and has made like a smudgy feel, which I want to neaten off. I tried using sort of a pointy tool trying to scrape that off, but then I found using a fine paintbrush with a small amount of water on it cleaned it off much better. You'll need to do this while the texture paste or the grit paste or the gesso is still wet. Of course, you don't have to do this. If there is a smudge, you can just leave it. Most times I do. For this one though, I wanted it a little bit neater and I wanted the definition of the leaves. It's never too late to join in the Full Deck Challenge. This is Full Deck Challenge 2. There is a playlist for Full Deck Challenge 1 and I'll put both links to both playlists in the description box below. If you're on Facebook, do join my group there. Just search Full Deck Challenge Group. I've dried the grit paste really well. I'm now going to add some additional ink. I'm using again the color Vintage Photo, this time in the liquid form, which comes in the spray bottle. I just add a few drops and then I spray some water with my spray bottle and I just move the card around and let the color flow in between the texture paste or the grit paste, and it creates beautiful light and dark tones. For some additional white, I've done these die cuts. I have these leaf dies and I've used just plain white cardstock and I've cut them. They're very whimsical and I don't want the card to be flat, so I want this to sort of create a 3D element, and I'm going to let some of them hang off the card and some from the back. So they're extending off the page or off the card. I take some time just to place them to see where I want them, and once I'm happy with the positioning, I'm going to glue those down with some craft glue. So some of the die cuts are going over the grit paste that I've already put. That doesn't hide the grit paste, I think it just enhances it. So the grit paste is in the background and these are sitting in the foreground. It creates great dimension. And I think the white balances out the darker Vintage Photo ink on the left quite well. It's a good idea to use a liquid craft glue when you apply this kind of element on your project. It doesn't dry instantly. It gives you a few minutes where it is still movable and you can adjust the embellishment or the element to the correct position. And then I'm trimming off the bottom because that doesn't look great. I like it sticking out from the top and on the right hand side. To connect everything and make everything look as one. I'm going to add a little bit of white splatter using watered down white acrylic paint. I'm covering up the leaves. I don't want the splatter to go near the bottom, just at the top section, just very little. And I think that finishes it off really well. Let me show you a close-up of the card so you can see all the detail. Although it was pretty simple, there is quite a bit of detail and it has some great dimension. I really hope you enjoyed watching this altered playing card and were inspired to create your own. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch. Don't forget to subscribe. Happy creating, and I'll see you again soon. Bye.